The Nashville Predators went up 3-0 on the Ottawa Senators, and I'm not really sure what happened after that. I kind of tuned out. I assume it went well, and I'll finish reading the box score, and then we can comment what happened on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast the first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to give a special shout out to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys, and we appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at the Hockey News.
Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your best bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right. As I mentioned in the intro, Predators were up 3-0. Let me just check NHL.com to see what happened. And
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Oh, no. Oh, the Predators didn't win. Oh, well, that's
bad.
No.
Yeah. No, they did not.
That didn't work well.
No.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like we have this conversation a lot, don't we? Where it's just the Preds. It's either the Preds get off to a hot start and can't finish the deal, or they get off to an absolutely abysmal start and then play better as the game gets on, but it's too little too late. Like it's what is it with this team? Like it's just the same storylines, loss after loss after loss.
Yeah, I try to comfort myself with the fact that this is not unexpected big picture for where the team is. That is how I try to comfort myself. That and like chocolate is the only way I really got through last night. I'm not going to lie.
There's some cherry cordial ice cream at the Morgan household that helps smooth this whole thing over.
That's right. We eat our big feelings on Locked On Predators. But it really felt like this was maybe one of the most like yin and yang games of the season, where you see one thing from the Nashville Predators and all of a sudden you see the exact opposite from the Nashville Predators. You know, that first period, the Preds came out and dominated. And then the second and third period happened. And you thought, wait a minute, are we in some sort of alternate universe? You know, did Thanos snap his fingers? Are we in a multiverse situation? What has happened in, you know, the 60 plus minutes of that game? It was the most quickly I've seen the team go from dominating play and headed towards a win to, oh, sweet baby Jesus, it's not going to happen, is it?
No, absolutely did not. Let's run through this game real quick, Ann, because there's a lot of stuff that I thought was really, really good, but the Predators in a good position. Yeah. Michael McCarron, who, when he and Phil Tomasino are together, are apparently Shaq and Kobe. McCarron gets the Preds scoring started, a goal, good feed from Roman Josi, but set up with a good play from Tomasino, the latter of whom would score himself about 8 minutes later. Phil Tomasino's sixth goal of the year, a great wrist shot, great play overall to get past Solgaard. And then Yakov Trenin, right before the first intermission, gets the Nashville Predators up 3-0 to put the Predators in what looked like a really, really good spot. The Senators made a goalie change. Jonas Korpisalo came in at that point. And then the wheels just fell off for the Nashville Predators. And we had goals from Drake Batherson, Tim Stützle, and Brady Tkachuk, all within the span of about 12 minutes. And that Preds lead just went away just like that, 3-3. Senators absolutely dominated the play from the rest of the game. In the third period and overtime, the Preds only managed 6 shots on goal. The Senators had 15, including the game-winning goal in overtime from Claude Giroux. Came on a odd man rush after the Predators absolutely flubbed a 2-on-1 chance. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit, but that was the game-winning goal for the Senators. Preds blow it again, 4-3 the final score, and your one word to describe the game.
This game to me was the Twilight series. And I don't know if you watched, have you watched
I think
the
you
Twilight
can safely assume that's a no.
Can I though?
I mean, I hadn't watched Love Actually until
I know. Have you watched
2
Pretty
months
Woman
ago.
yet?
Do what?
Have you watched Pretty Woman yet?
I have not watched Pretty Woman yet.
All right. We have a lot of work to do here at Locked On Predators, but let's focus in because my one word for this Senators loss is the Twilight series. And I had never heard of or read the books. And a friend of mine said, hey, let's sit down and watch this movie called Twilight. And you sit down and you watch it and you're like, oh, it's a catchy little movie about a cool high school romance. It's, this is kind of clever. Yes, one's a vampire, but it's kind of fun. He drives fast and da 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 da. But as the series goes on, all of the sudden you're like, there's a werewolf. And then all of a sudden you're like, there's so much relational dysfunction happening in this high school romance between a human and a vampire. And hey, by the way, there's a werewolf that kind of jumps in and out romantically sometimes. That by the end, you're like, I'm overwhelmed and unsure how to process what I just saw. Like the Twilight series had so much promise for me because I thought it was one thing. And then in the end, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a whole other thing. And that was kind of the same feeling I had watching this game. It's like the first period was the Twilight book, and then the second and third period were like Eclipse and whatever the other ones were, where things just got weirder and more dysfunctional. And in the end, you're like, I don't really know what just happened to me. I don't know what just happened to me. That is what this game was. This was Bella, a vampire, and a werewolf. What in the world?
Yeah.
Resounding like affirmation that you need to watch this series, wasn't it?
Do I?
Do you?
I think it seems like you were kind of describing the Fantastic Beasts series, or like maybe like the new Star Wars, like the three, like the 3 new ones. Where at first you're like, okay, like this is a pretty intriguing start, and then it's like the more the series goes on, it's like, wow, this is stupid.
Yeah. He's got the high ground and all the other, It started as something you thought you could enjoy, and then it turned into something that you couldn't unsee.
Yeah. My one word, I'm going back to the movies for this one, like you, Dan, but I'm going to go Monstars. If you've ever watched Space Jam, the team of evil aliens that Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes have to face is called the Monstars. Now, this is a trope you can kind of use for any like feel-good sports movie, like the Mighty Ducks, or I don't know.
Another one.
The Little Giant. Yeah, the Little Giants. There you go. Where, the other team just goes up like 8-0, or just puts like, it's like a blowout in the first half of the game. And then the other team, there's like a big motivational speech, or the other team gets cocky, or the other team plays quirky. And it's like, oh, like, haha, Wile E. Coyote is bringing TNT onto the court. And then you slowly just see things unravel for the bad guy team. We just like to cheer for that because it's the bad guy team. But last night, the Predators were the bad guy team. They were the Monstars. They were the Hawks from whatever town in Minnesota the Mighty Ducks take place in. Like they started off strong. They had a stranglehold on this game. And not just, the fact of scoring goals, but I really think they dominated possession. I really think they dominated the pace of the play. They just had the upper hand early on the Senators. And then it just things fell apart. The Senators battled back in the second period, but
They did.
I thought the Predators did a fairly good job sort of going tick for tack. Even when Batherson scored that first goal, to me, the turning point came when Tim Stützle scored that second goal and made it 3-2. Because at that point, it was no longer like, okay, the Predators have a stranglehold in this game. You could see them just sort of collapse at that point. When it became 3-2, that's when the momentum changed. And that was, that Tim Stützle goal was Yosemite Sam and Elmer Fudd dressed as the Pulp Fiction guys shooting the teeth out of the Monstars. That was when you're like, oh, they got this now. It was like Bill Murray showing up at the end of Space Jam. It was like, oh, the Sens got this now, and sure enough, it was one last dramatic play. Claude Giroux with the stretching of the arm.
Yep.
In this case, the one timing of the puck to put the good guys ahead for good and give them a feel good win. And for the Nashville Predators, you have to look inward. They collapsed.
Yeah. Yeah. They really did sort of buckle. And I think we kind of have to look at why maybe this happened the way that it did. Why did this happen? Predators, I feel like, were very lucky to get out of this game with 1 point. This felt like, in watching the game, as time was going down in the third period, I was like, this is going to be one of those games where Ottawa is going to score in the last 2 minutes. And that's how this is going to go. So I think the Predators, very fortunate to hang on and get a point out of this game, really needed 2 points out of this game and just couldn't get it done. It was a tough night. Tough game.
Yeah, more to talk about this game in just a second, including an apology from me to Anne live on the show. We'll also talk about maybe some lineup decisions coming into play late in this game. And much, much more from the Preds' collapse against the Ottawa Senators coming up in just 1 second. First, though, I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Folks, the Super Bowl right around the corner. We're not going to talk about the teams in it because I hate both of them right now. But you can still have fun on Super Bowl Sunday. If you're like me, it's always about finding the best seat on the couch, grabbing our favorite football snacks, and having some fun with some Super Bowl bets. Love the prop bets, like who's going to score the first touchdown, like who's going, like what the coin toss is going to be. I love those kind of bets. And those are the deals that you can find on FanDuel that will help you end the season with a W. Not only can bet on who will win at Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, over-unders on stats like passing yards, rushing yards, and so much more. And if you're a new customer, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's right. All you have to do is nail a $5 bet and you'll get $200 instantly. Just join FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
It is a new year, and let's be honest, most of us are hoping to get healthier this year by eating healthier this year. You can get started on that resolution with Factor, so you are ready for the new year. Factor has ready-to-eat meals delivered to you, and they take the stress out of meal planning and set you up for success this new year. You can skip the grocery store lines. You can skip all that prep work and cooking fatigue. Instead, you will get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your front door. With over 35 meals to choose from per week, including options like keto, calorie smart. They have a vegan and veggie option and more. Plus, they have over 55 weekly add-ons. So you're going to have a ton of nutritious and flavorful options to kickstart that resolution. And of course, we all know that snacks and breakfasts can be tricky when you are trying to change your eating habits. Factor offers loads of options like breakfasts, smoothies, juices. They have snacks and more to keep you going no matter what's on your schedule. When things get hectic, Factor is flexible. You can change your order up every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. Factor has everything you need for a week of flavorful, nutritious eats. In addition to those ready-made meals, they have cold pressed juices, smoothies, energy bites. They have extra protein. They have veggie sides and more to keep you energized during those frantic times. So go and head to factormeals.com/Locked On NHL50 and use our code Locked On NHL50 to get 50% off. Again, that is code Locked On NHL50 at factormeals.com/Locked On NHL50, and you will get 50% off.
All right, Ann, we are talking about the Nashville Predators 4-3 overtime loss to the Ottawa Senators last night. And what stood out to you from the Nashville Predators standpoint in this game?
I feel like this is kind of a broken record as we talk about things that stand out with the Nashville Predators that need to be addressed. But for me, again, I got to come back to this power play. We have
It
talked
was
about the
bad.
power play. It's rough. And look, I will say this. I want to give credit. I like what Andrew Brunette did on the power play. He mixed up the power play units. So the units last night, the top unit was Glass, Forsberg, Novak, Yossi, and Ryan O'Reilly. I like that. Bring up Novak, plug Glass in there. I think Glass is good net front. The second unit was Nyquist, Evangelista, Sissons, McDonough, and Garyanov, where you get some more experience with Sissons and Nyquist with these younger guys. So I think headed in the right direction with that. And they did have some good looks. I think it was maybe their first power play chance in the second period when Korpisalo had come in. They got 4 shots on goal. They really pressured. They had good looks. They moved the puck well. So it looked better. But the bottom line is we're getting to a point in the season where I don't care how the power play looks. I care how the power play scores. And the Nashville Predators power play is 0 for 13. They have not scored on their last 13 chances on the power play. And you just absolutely cannot win in this league without special teams. You cannot win in this league. This was a game where one goal may not have changed dramatically the score of the game, but it could have changed the momentum in the second and third period. And the Nashville Predators needed to interrupt the momentum in the second and third period. Couldn't do it. And they were given chances. So for me, I like mixing up the units. I think they looked better, but at some point you have to stop looking better and you got to be better.
Yeah. I mean, you give them credit for trying. They're trying new things, but at some point, it's interesting. And there's something I would kind of knock Andrew Brunette for that we're going to get to a little bit later in the show. But at some point, the focus has got to shift on coaching to the players. If you're trying new things, if you're trying new strategies and the players still just aren't executing, there's got to be some responsibility on there too. And I think you said it earlier this season where the special teams is the best reflection of the level of coaching these players, the players on a team get more so than any other area of the game. But in this case, I would say okay, at some point these players on the ice have to execute.
Yeah.
I owe you an apology. Or I guess a classic case of you were right, Ann.
I love these.
Because last week we got on the show and you said that it might be time for the Nashville Predators to shake up the top line.
Yeah.
I disagreed. I'm like, you know what? They've shown a lot. I want to see them play themselves out. I am now starting to fall into your camp that top line might need a little bit of a shakeup.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? The reason I didn't want it at first was because I hated the line blending that we've had for 2 coaches now. You would have this combo in training camp. Or during practices, and they work together all week, and then they get into a game and they have a bad shift and all of a sudden, you blow it up. And I hated that. I love the chance for, maybe a line like Forsberg, O'Reilly, Nyquist to have a bad game, to be outplayed, but then come out the next game and, sort of prove themselves and, them having, one of their best nights of the season. Like, I love that aspect of it, but they've fallen sort of stale for the last little bit.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned last night, when they were out there, they were mostly against the other team's top line.
They were.
And that's been the case for a couple of games now. And they're constantly starting to get outplayed a little bit by the other team's top line, and just not the same energy that we saw from the beginning of the season. And I'm starting to think that maybe switching some things up might actually raise the energy levels up. And I'm not quite sure who. Like, do you maybe move Gustav Nyquist back down and put somebody maybe like Luke Evangelista or Phil Tomasino back up? Just some experience of playing on that top line, get some new energy.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a route that we start to take now, Anne?
I think it's something that has to kind of be on the table and discussed. You do hate to see this line broken up because they have a tremendous amount of chemistry. They're very good. I dove into some of the statistics from the month of January because I'm with you. It just seems like lately it's just they're struggling to produce. And a lot of that is teams have cracked the code. I don't think you have to be Scooby-Doo driving the mystery machine to figure out that the way Nashville has been winning games is the top line is scoring really well. So teams are putting their best players against them. Last night, that was Artem Zub, that was Jake Sanderson, Kachuk, that was Norris, that was Batherson against our top line. And that's going to make it more challenging. So part of that is just the natural evolution of, hey, people have caught on. But you look in January, 20% of the Predators offense, 20% of the goals scored at even strength came from that top line. Pretty good, but it's just still not enough. And at this point, I really wonder if you want to shake it up a little bit. They made some adjustments like we talked about on the power play units. This might be the time. We might be coming into the time where you do break these guys up and, hey, let's see if we can make one really good line become two pretty good lines and get some other players going. Confidence is contagious. That is something that Andrew Brunette has talked about with some of these young players that are struggling to finish. Maybe we need to borrow some confidence from Forsberg, from Factor, from Nyquist, and see if we can make that catch. The other thing I wanted to say, you had kind of talked about earlier, you were talking about this, this top line and the line blender, and we don't like that. I think we have to be careful when we talk about the line blender because it's a little bit of a different situation. The line blender under Hines and under Laviolette was really one thing. What Andrew Brunette would be doing mixing up the lines is something very different. Because of the Predators are in a very different place. Like, this is a team that is resetting. This is a team that is developing. I mean, their focus really is developing young players and getting back to contention. So I think mixing up lines when you are working to develop and to get back to contention is a different decision than doing the line blender when you are a team that should be in contention. So I don't know that we have to be quite as opposed to it as what we have been in the past. I just think we're a little sunburned. Anytime anybody starts blending the lines, I think we're all a little hungover from it.
So there's a point to this that I want to make coming up in a second. And it involves maybe some criticism that I have over maybe over some of the lineup decisions that Andrew Brunette is making in game. And we're going to talk about that coming up in just 1 second.
First, want to let you know this episode's brought to you by our great friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, those are things that bring home the winning trophy in sports. Those things also keep your car, your ride or die, alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. They have over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, and you're going to always find exactly what you're looking for there. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, you are not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is available to U.S. customers only.
All right, and we're talking about the lineup decisions
Mhm.
for the Nashville Predators before the break, and it brought me to something I wanted to bring up last night. To me, one of the best players for the Nashville Predators last night was Phil Tomasino.
Yeah,
He was cooking in
he
that
was
third period. And
cooking.
I don't know what it is when he's with Michael McCarron, but the two always bring out the best in each other.
Peaches and herb.
Yeah, Phil Tomasino, goal, assist last night, 2 points. Clearly, I think had the most energy on the team. The Predators looked more dangerous when he was on the ice
Yeah.
than anybody else. Why did he only have 4 shifts from the third period onward and none in overtime? And here's who got more ice time than him in that situation. Denis Gurianov, who I think that experiment needs to end.
Yeah.
You know, Cody Glass, who I love Cody Glass, but not necessarily the most effective person last night. You know, you have your regular cavalcade of fourth liners and you know, bottom 6 people.
Right.
You know, Michael McCarron had more shifts down the stretch than Phil Tomasino did. Michael McCarron had more ice time than Phil Tomasino. Like,
Yeah.
here's the thing. Andrew Brunette, you and I have talked about this. Andrew Brunette likes rewarding people. And we've
Mhm.
talked about this like in game. It's like, oh, you know what? If somebody like Cole Smith or Kiefer Sherwood or you know, I know he's in Milwaukee right now, but Juuso Parssinen or Yakov Trenin, if those kind of guys, you know, get a lot of minutes down the stretch, it's because they had an effect early. And Andrew Brunette's like, you know, they were the hot hand. We want to ride the hot hand. Like that's you know, we don't have first, second, third, fourth lines because we want to make sure we're always riding the hot hand. So why didn't you ride the hot hand last night? Again, it's like you're kind of breaking your own rules when it comes to the handling of younger players. And it's starting the John Hines Nashville Predators, David Poile sort of, I don't know if they're handling these young players right narrative is starting to come back in a little bit with Andrew Brunette. And it's hard to ignore it in a game like last night when somebody who was objectively one of your best players for the first 2 periods wasn't on the ice hardly at all in the
Yeah.
third.
Yeah. And I think you have a very valid question with this, because if you look at time on ice, Phil Tomasino had the least amount of time on ice, with the exception of Alexander Carrier, who left in the second period with an injury.
Yeah.
You know, and Phil Tomasino, like you said, we talked about, he had a goal. He had a fantastic goal. Like that whole play, it wasn't just, hey, the puck trickled onto his puck and he scored a goal. Like he really made a quality play. He was tied for second in expected goals for by the end of the game. He was behind Roman Josi, tied with Tommy Novak. So Phil Tomasino was somebody who was a difference maker on the ice in this game. The only thing that I can think, and this is speculation on my part, and I would have to sort of dig into the numbers to see if this is even accurate. But off the top of my head, because the game was so completely flipped, And it had become a defensive game in a lot of ways for the Nashville Predators in the second and third. Maybe Brunette didn't feel like defensively he was going to be one of the top players out there defending and winning the puck battles, and just for the physicality of that very dramatic switch in the game. I'm not saying that's necessarily an accurate thing. I'm just saying off the top of my head, when I was watching it, I was like, is he thinking that Phil Tomasino is not going to be the impact player in the situation with the game turned the way that Cole Smith, Michael McCarron, Cody Glass would be?
But isn't that the backwards way of thinking? Like, isn't that what doomed John Hines was? We're going to heavily rely on these people when the game goes on. Like, wasn't the big thing with Andrew Brunette is like, no, like, we don't want to go into a defensive shell. Like, we want to attack. Like, even when we get down, like, we want to be on the front foot, and we want to kind of, like, if we lose the puck, we want to be able to have the speed to kind of go get it back and cause disruptions. Like, wasn't that the point? Like, wasn't that the big thing that Andrew Brunette was preaching? And, are you really telling me that Denis Gurianov, who had 14, 15 minutes of ice time? Yeah, almost 15 minutes of ice time last night.
Yeah.
Are you really telling me that that's your X factor? Like, that's the guy that was going to go out and change the game for you last night, not the guy who had 2 points in the first period. Like, but that's like, I get it. Like, I understand like the argument. I just think it's a stupid argument.
Well,
like,
and
you got to rely on the players who helped put energy into the lineup and were winning their battles earlier in the period.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to big picture. This is the team that's about developing young players. So in this instance, doesn't that mean you put Phil Tomasino out there?
Right.
Doesn't that mean you put him out in the situation where, hey, like, you're going to have to play a 200-foot game that's going to have to be good enough to help us win? And it didn't happen. So I do think I think that's a fair question. Where was Phil Tomasino?
Yeah. And again, like, if the argument is really, okay, we're on, the rebuilding track, and, we want to see what we have in some of these younger people, why are you giving Denis Gurianov the opportunity to go out there and prove himself, and not the former first round pick who you might be able to build around in the future? We're having this. It's concerning because this was the same conversations we had years ago, like seasons ago, and they're starting to creep back up. And, it's not a case this time of, maybe Phil Tomasino just doesn't, isn't where he needs to be right now, and we need to protect him a little bit. He's at the point where you got to take the kid's gloves off.
Yeah.
And say, okay, like, why are we trusting an AHL player to step up in this situation, who, by the way, flubbed the final play last night? Like, why are we giving those opportunities to somebody like him and not, Tomasino?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I think it's a fair question to look at the ice time, to look at the third period, to look at overtime and say, where was Phil Tomasino?
Yeah.
Fair question.
One of the most because of the lack of ice time, has become one of the best bang for your buck players on the Nashville Predators this year. Yeah, this is a conversation that we're going to have to tackle a lot over the course of this week, and we certainly will. The next Nashville Predators game is a big one against the LA Kings, team that's right there with them in the wild card spot. So we'll have a lot to talk about this week as we get going here on the podcast. That's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back with an all-new episode tomorrow. We'll see you then.